Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. This is Dr. Salimur Rahman. In this series of 3 lectures, I will talk about the project time management, the project cost management, and the interrelationship of these two. In this first lecture, we will learn why do we need to manage time. We'll also learn the different generations of time management. In other words, the evolution of the time management practices over a period of time. And then we will learn why it is important for us to differentiate between the importance and urgency of different activities that we perform. We will then switch to the project management side and having a brief look at the key knowledge areas of project management. We will identify the 3 key areas, which are project scope, project time, and cost management. And in this series of 3 lectures, we will primarily talk about time management and the relationship of time with cost management. So we will look at the tools and techniques of project time management. And finally, this lecture will conclude on the use of network diagrams and the critical path method. Like all businesses or operations, the projects have 7 resources. The famous 4 M's, which stand for man, machine, money, and material. Time is also unique and precious resource. Markets nowadays are also considered as resource, and so is information or data. The $1,000,000 question is, why do we need to manage time? It's because time is a precious resource. Time once lost cannot be regained. You cannot go back in time. Quite often, we run short of time for any activity, any job that we do. So it is important for us to work in an organized and planned manner so that time is not wasted. We all take decisions in our daily lives, in our businesses, particularly in projects, and we know that success of a decision not only depends on its quality, but also on its timing. And in order to successfully complete a project, each activity of a project has to be completed in a timely manner. There's a famous author, Stephen Covey, and he has many bestsellers to his credit. One of those is 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And among those 7 habits, the 3rd habit of effective and influential people is putting first things first. This means organizing and executing around one's most important priorities. In other words, one has to know what he or she has to do, associate priority to those tasks, and then act upon those. So according to Covey, the mankind learned to manage time over centuries. In the beginning, people learned to make notes and prepare checklists to manage their time. The quest for further improvement led them to the 2nd generation, where people learned to mark calendars, prepare timetables, maintain appointment books. But then, finding even that insufficient, in the 3rd generation, people learned to compare the relative worth of different activities, different projects, and to prioritize them. In the 4th generation, the learning was that the term time management is basically a misnomer. The challenge has never been to manage time, but to manage ourselves. And that is the best learning. If we can manage ourselves, we can always manage time. Whatever we do, the activities that we perform, they can be put on two different grids. They can be put or assessed on different scales. One scale can be the importance. And looking at two extremes, every activity will either be important or unimportant. Likewise, if you look at the timings or the urgency, things would either be urgent or not urgent. Obviously, all activities would fall somewhere in between, whether it is the urgent not urgent scale or the importance, but we are talking about two extremes in either case. So for all possible combinations of these, we get a 2 by 2 table. In this table, we have now 4 quadrants. Quadrant 1 describes the activities which are important as well as urgent, and these cover crises, pressing problems, and deadline driven projects. Quadrant 2 that describes activities which are urgent but not important. These include interruptions, some mail, some telephone calls, meetings, reports, pressing matters, and popular activities. Quadrant 3 covers those activities which are important but not urgent, and these include planning, prevention, relationship building, recognizing opportunities, capacity building, and recreation. Quadrant number 4 covers trivial busy work, some mails, some telephone calls, time wasters, and pleasant activities. Now, if we look at the activities that we perform on daily basis and try to put them in this table and then figure out how much time do we devote to activities that fall in each of these quadrants, we'll be surprised to note that we spend around 70% of our time in these two quadrants. In other words, we spend most of our time on activities which are urgent, whether or not they are important. We spend less than 30% on these. Obviously, we should not be spending any time in quadrant number 4. People who are organized, who have control over themselves, they would prefer working in quadrant number 3, because if you work in quadrant number 3, then because of planning, because of preventing crises, and all other attributes like capacity building, having recreation means getting refreshed and being in a position to perform even better, we are in a position to avoid crises, tackle pressing problems efficiently. But we don't realize that importance relates to outcomes and results, whereas urgency acts upon you. Right now, when I am recording this lecture, if the telephone bell rings or the doorbell bell rings, I would be forced or tempted to attend that even if it is not important. But that ringing bell would act upon me. It would force me to discontinue this important activity and respond to that first. People many a times are fond of doing things that fall in these two quadrants which are urgent, because while crises are not only urgent but also important, pressing problems and deadline driven projects are urgent as well as important. So sometimes we confuse importance with urgency, and anytime we get to do something on a short notice, we think because it is urgent it will be important, but that is not necessarily so. So different people spend different proportions of their time in different quadrants. Wise people, as I said, would try to spend most of their time in quadrant number 3. Whichever quadrant you spend most of your time in, it has an effect on your personality and it has effect on your health, behavior and personality. Let us see what happens to people when they spend most of their time in quadrant number 1. The results of frequently operating in quadrant number 1 or spending most of your time in quadrant number 1 is that the person who does that will be termed as a crisis management expert. He would always be putting out fires, but that person would remain under stress and eventually he or she may burn out. But this is something for which people become popular. They are always in demand and they think they are in control because everybody likes them, everybody looks up to them, but they are actually not in control. The events, the demands actually make them do things. People who spend most of their time operating in quadrant number 2, that means doing things that fall in quadrant number 2, they are also termed or believed to be crisis management experts, except that they may be wasting their time on activities that are urgent but not important. So they may not be in good demand, but it is because they are unable to distinguish between importance and unimportant activities, only because every time they have an urgent call, they believe that that activity has to be important. Such people have a short-term focus. They see goals and plans as worthless because their perception is that no matter how much time you waste in planning, eventually things have to be done as the things unfold. So they react rather than being proactive. But over a period of time, such people feel victimized and out of control. They have shallow or broken relationship. So they work in isolation and they gradually get cut off from their families and friends. The results of operating in quadrant number 4 is that people who spend most of their time in quadrant number 4, they become totally irresponsible. Mostly they get fired from their job and they start depending upon others. So they become parasites. The results of operating in quadrant number 3 are that those people who spend most of their time are people with vision and perspective. They learn how to remain balanced, how to be disciplined, how to assume control and avoid crises. So these are the people who are liked as business leaders, and they are the ones who deserve to be given the position of project manager. Some useful guidelines for time management, whether in our daily lives or in our jobs, operations or projects. First thing is that we need to be organized. We need to value time. We should prepare checklists, set priorities, allocate time proportional to the importance of the activities. We should avoid useless discussions and time wasters. Reduce our idleness. We should always remain busy in doing things. If there's nothing else, we should try to learn new things and enhance our work on our capacity building. We should try following our schedule, adopt a habit of recap, and finally spare time for hobbies and sports. With these guidelines, let's go back to project management. The knowledge areas of project management can be bifurcated in key knowledge areas and those areas which are less important. So the key knowledge areas are 10 as per the Project Management Institution body of knowledge. The first is integration management, then is scope management, time management, cost management, quality management, human resource management, risk management, procurement management, communication management, and stakeholders management. Out of these, we would target the two here, time management and cost management. I have highlighted the scope management also only because I had to show you this triple constraint or 3D goal, where you have three constraints. You have certain goals of quality and scope, you have limited time, and have limited funds available to you. So these are three constraints, and you at times need to compromise on one to achieve other. So not touching the requirements, the scope, the quality, we will focus on the relationship between time and cost. So the project time management, again referring to the project management body of knowledge, the project time management as a knowledge area has 5 processes, which are activity definition, activity sequencing, activity duration estimation, schedule development, and schedule control. Each one of these processes has its inputs, applies some tools and techniques, and that results in the process outputs. Ignoring the inputs and outputs, which are usually interrelated, let's look at the tools and techniques of each of these processes. The activity definition has 2 tools or techniques: decomposition of the project activities and templates. Duration estimation has expert judgment, analogous estimation, quantitative based durations, reserved timings or contingency. The activity sequencing requires knowledge of arrow diagramming method, precedence diagramming method, conditional diagramming method, network templates. The schedule development covers mathematical analysis, duration compression, simulation, resource leveling, use of project management software, and coding structures. And the schedule control covers schedule change control system, performance measurement, additional planning, again project management software, and variance analysis. Out of these, the ones that are shown in boldface will be the tools or techniques that we will cover in this series of lecture. As I said, the overall project can be divided into different smaller components called activities or tasks. This process results in a structure which is called work breakdown structure, WBS, which is a hierarchical list of work activities required to complete a project. It includes managerial, administrative, integral, or developmental activities for product development, project management, and for providing support for all the project activities. How do we prepare work breakdown structure? It is a description of the work to be performed, broken down into key components to the lowest level in such a manner that each component can be sized and the required effort estimated. In most projects, the development effort is directly related to the size and complexity of the desired product. The decomposition of project into activities or tasks involves 2 views. The product view is a hierarchical relationship among elements, whereas the project view describes the hierarchical relationship among activities, which are the process elements, and this is what we will be focusing upon. Here's an example of work breakdown structure of a software system. So you initially divide it into major components, and then one of these components, for example, can be further divided into 2 components, front end as site template and web pages, and web pages can be further divided into web pages and SQL schema. Likewise, the back end can be further divided into smaller components or segments like admin interface, database, and SQL schema. Here's another example. Again, notice that you can go to different levels of activities, breaking them down into smaller and smaller components such that you reach the smallest possible components to which you can assign resources and then monitor its performance. Coming to the project network preparation and analysis, the terms that we will use in this part of the lecture and in the subsequent two lectures, one such term is network. It's a graphical representation of logically and sequentially connected arrows and nodes representing activities and events of a project. Networks are also called arrow diagrams. Network scheduling is a technique used for planning and scheduling large projects. How do we construct networks? There are two basic ways. One of the methods is use of arrows. This is what we term as arrow diagramming. In this method, an arrow is used to represent an activity or task. On top of the arrow, we write its nomenclature or identity or code. Usually, we denote those with letters A, B, C, etc. to save space. And below the arrow, you write its duration, whether it is in days or weeks or months. Every arrow or every activity has one node or event at tail and one at the head, and they are numbered in such a manner that the number at the tail is smaller than the number at the head. So J is always greater than I. In the second method or approach, activities which were represented by arrows here are represented by rectangles. In this rectangle, you write the name or title of the activity that we wrote here on the arrow. You write its starting date or time, its finishing time, its identity, its duration, and the resources required for that are associated or allocated. And the event which was represented by a circle here, event or node, that event is represented by an arrow in this method. So whether you use this method or this method, it works fine, but it is better to learn both. In the first method, which is the arrow diagramming method, this is how a network would look like. You will have activities connected by nodes or circles, and these circles are numbered. Notice that we move from left to right in increasing order of the node numbers. Also note that our project starts with one node and it ends at the last node. There are no hanging or dangling activities like an arrow here which has no node at the end. And sometimes you would see, or you will have to draw dotted lines. These are called dummy activities. This is required when you need to show interdependence. For example, here, this activity C follows activity A. So activity C cannot be started unless A has been completed. Activity D cannot be started unless activity D is completed. But activity E can be started only when D as well as A both have been completed. Now we could not draw A up to this point and also to this point because only one arrow can be used for A. So if we join these two together, that would mean that C also depends upon D, but C does not depend upon D. C can be started even if D has not been completed, or even if it has not been started. The only requirement is that A should have been completed. But since activity E requires A and D both to be completed, D has been shown here. So the relationship with A has been shown here with a dotted arrow. In the second method, which is the precedence diagram method, this is how the same network would look like. This is the activity A in a rectangle or box, activity B, activity C, D, E, F, G and H, and notice activity C follows activity A. This arrow indicates that this cannot be started unless A has been completed, And notice this activity E, there is an arrow from here which indicates that E can be started only when A has been finished and also when D has been finished. And D can be started only when B had been finished. So actual requirement for E is that A, B and D, all three should have been completed. But there is no need for redundant arrows, because if D depends upon B, we need not state that E also depends upon B, because if D has been completed, it clearly means that B has already been completed. So we do not use redundant arrows, we do not use redundant events or activities, whether dummy activities or events, in this case arrows. The outcome of the CPM, critical path method, is not only the network diagram but also a Gantt chart that puts the performance or scheduling of the events on a timeline. The same project which had 8 activities with different durations. This number here, predecessor, it states that C depends upon an activity which is in row number 1 and row number 1 activity A is there. D depends upon activity in row number 2 which is B. E, activity E depends upon 1 and 4. 1 is activity A and 4 is activity D. So this is the dependence upon these activities on these activities, and it is called predecessors. And these predecessors have been shown here by these arrows. This bar chart is termed as Gantt chart. In the first method, which is the arrow diagramming method, let us analyze the relationship between nodes and activities. In other words, for a given number of activities, how many nodes do we need? Consider the same problem in which we had 8 activities, but now we have a slightly different requirement. Instead of the interdependence shown previously, we assume that all these activities can be started and performed simultaneously. In such a scenario, we would need only 2 events. Instead of circles, I'm drawing ellipses to save space. But since there is no requirement for activity A to be completed for C to start, or B to be completed for D to start, all the activities can be started simultaneously. So they can all be covered in these 2 events, event number 1 and event, whether you call it event or node. Now this project, whether it has 8 activities or 800 or 8 million activities, it would require only 2 nodes, 2 circles. So the number of nodes is 2, and that is the minimum possible, because even if you have one activity, one arrow, there will be 2 nodes, one at the tail, one at the head. So you cannot have less than 2 nodes. Also, in this particular case where the activities can be performed in parallel, the project completion time is the maximum out of the times of different activities, and this is the minimum possible time. The project cannot be completed before that. So in case all the activities can be performed in parallel, the project completion time will be the time of that activity which has the longest duration. Here we are assuming that these times are deterministic. They are known to remain same. These are not probabilistic. The probabilistic or varying or random times will be covered in our 3rd lecture when we talk about PERT. Okay, now consider the same 8 activities, but this time our requirement is that these activities can be performed one after the other. So activity B starts only when activity A has been completed. C starts after completion of B. D starts after completion of C. So notice that this time they are put in a sequence. This is like series. The previous case was of activities in parallel. Here all the activities are in series. And now note, for one activity we had 2 nodes. Now you add one more activity, you add one more node. So eventually for 8 activities you get 9 nodes. So in general, if there are n activities, you will have n plus 1 nodes. Also note then since these activities have to be performed one after the other, so the project completion time in this case will be the sum of the times of all these activities, and that is shown on the next slide. The number of nodes will be the number of activities plus 1. In our case it is 8 plus 1, and that is the maximum possible number. For all other combinations where you have some activities in parallel, some in series, the number of nodes will be between 2 and 9, or in general between 2 and n plus 1. The project completion time is in this case the sum of the times of all the activities, and that is the maximum possible value. But in practical life, when you have a complex project involving activities in series and parallel, the time would be somewhere in between the minimum time and the maximum possibility. Now coming to the construction guidelines, how do we construct a network? These are the useful guidelines, and then we'll go for the steps. First, draw arrows from left to right. So tail should be on the left side and arrow head should be on the right side. Even it can be slanting upwards or downwards, but we should move from left to right. Try to avoid crossing arrows. At times it becomes impossible to avoid, so we should try to the extent possible. Also try using straight arrows. Consider an event to be completed only when all the activities terminating at that node are completed. An event cannot occur twice, so that means no looping. Arrows cannot take you backwards, and this will be ensured if you move from left to right. An activity succeeding an event cannot start until that event has occurred. Use dummy activities only if it is a must. Do not use dummy activities unnecessarily, so no redundancy. Also have only one entry point, which is the starting node, usually numbered as 1, and one point of emergence or end node. So looking at the diagram, one should easily find out which one is the starting node and which one is the finishing or ending node. Here are the steps for network diagramming. Step number 1, list all the activities with their durations and precedence relationship. Step 2, assign node numbers using the information at step 1. Step 3, draw diagram using node number or precedence information and activity duration. Calculate the earliest starting time and earliest finishing time of each activity, and then the earliest finish time of each event. So initial two were related to the arrow or activity, and then to the event. For this purpose, use the forward pass technique, and that I'll explain next. Calculate the latest finish time and then latest start time of each activity and the latest finish time of each event, starting with the last event. So in the forward pass, we move from left to right from node number 1 to node number n, and notice that we first calculated the earliest start and then we went for earliest finish. In this case of backward pass, we find the finishing time first, from that we find the latest start. So we are moving in the opposite direction, and we are using subtraction. Here we will use addition, here we will use subtraction. Step number 6 is calculate the slack of each node or event, and then determine the total free and independent floats for each activity, and put all this information in a table for ready reference. The symbols or notations that we will use in network analysis are: every activity, while it would have a letter like capital A or B, but at times we would refer to those with their tail event and head event. So tail event is I, head event is J. Dij would then denote the time duration for completion of the activity Ij. So Ij, wherever you see here the two indices, this means we are talking about an activity. And if you use only one index, whether it is with E or L or S, these would refer to nodes or events. So EI would stand for earliest completion time of the event I. completion or finishing time. Li is the latest completion or finishing time of the event I. This is the earliest it can be finished, this is the latest it should be finished. And Si is the slack of the event, which is basically the difference of these two, Li minus Ei. The total float of the activity Ij will be represented by Tfij. Total float means the time by which this particular activity Ij can be delayed without affecting the project completion time. The free float of activity Ij will be represented by Ff, and free float represents again the slack or the possible delay in completion of this particular activity, such that it allows the subsequent or succeeding activities to use their own slack or float. Independent float of activity Ij is the slack or possible delay in the completion of activity Ij, such that it neither affects the float of the succeeding or following activities, nor does it affect the float of the activities which precede this particular activity. In other words, independent float would be less than or equal to free float, and this will be less than or equal to total float. But since these floats refer to times, these cannot be negative. So anytime you happen to find a negative independent float, replace it with 0. How do we perform forward pass? In the forward pass, the first thing we do is we set the earliest finish time of the first event as E1 is equal to 0. Notice the first circle will be numbered as 1. So E1 is set as 0. This is like starting or punching your stopwatch at 0. Then for j greater than I, remember whenever we talk about an activity, we say it is represented by two indices I and j, and the number at the tail has to be less than the number at the head. So j has to be more than I. For j more than I, set the earliest time of the activity Ij, earliest starting time, as Es, earliest start of activity Ij, is equal to Ei. That means the time E, that was the earliest finish time of the node which is at the tail of the activity Ij. Then compute the earliest finish time of the activity Ij as Ef, earliest finished, is equal to this earliest start time plus the duration of or the time this particular activity would take. So earliest start time is set as the Ei of the node that was at the tail. Then earliest finish time, it will be the same number which you found here plus the duration of that particular activity. Then increasing j, for j greater than 1, compute the latest finish time of the jth event using Ej is equal to maximum over k. K represents all those activities that end up at node j. So maximum out of Ek plus dkj, or simply because this has already been computed here, so it is maximum over k of Efkj. This I will explain on the next slide. But after we have done this, we have to repeat steps number 2 to 4 till we reach the last node n. In other words, in this forward pass, starting from E1 is equal to 0, we eventually find En. Now suppose the earliest finish times of these 4 nodes, nodes 3, 4, 5 and 7, which are connected to node 8. So here when we set the index k, this represents these 4 nodes that have different tail numbers, but their head number is same. The node at the head of all these activities, it is node number 8. Now if we know E4, we know E3, E5 and E7 to be 5, 2, 12 and 8. We perform the step which was shown in this relationship here. at step number 4. For that, we will also see how do we find these and then come to this. So right now we know these EIs. So what we do is, since we know E4 as 5, we will set the earliest start of activity 4.8. This is ES48 as 5. Add this 12 to it, which is Dij, and you get earliest finish EF48, EF of 48 as 17. 5 plus 12 as 17. Then E3 is known as 2, so earliest start of activity 3.8 is set as 2. Add 7 to this, you get 9. This is the earliest finish time of the activity 3.8. The earliest finishing time of node 5 is 12. So we set that as the earliest start time of activity 5.8. So if this activity can be started at time 12, it would take 11 units of time and it can be finished at time 23. So this is the earliest finishing time of activity 5.8. And finally, earliest finishing time of node 7 is 8. It is placed as earliest start time of the activity 7.8. ES78 is 8. Add this 9 to it, which is duration, you get 17 here, which is the earliest finish time of activity 7.8. Now we have 4 such numbers on these arrowheads, and the earliest finish time of node 8 or event 8 will be the maximum out of these 4, and the maximum out of these 4, 17, 9, 23 and 17, is this 23. So E8 becomes 23. This is how you initially compute the earliest start and earliest finish of each activity, and then choose the maximum one to be termed as the earliest finish of this node. And if you have only one arrow entering here, like in this case, so simply the time of this will be added. It will become here as earliest finish time of activity 8.9, and the same would become E9. Like we get 23 here. If there was a time here, we would add that and write it here as well as E9. In the backward pass, we will start backward pass once we have completed the forward pass. So in other words, we have already found En, starting from E1 is equal to 0. Once we have found En, so our starting point in the backward pass becomes that we set the Ln to be equal to En. And now we move backwards from right to left. So for I less than j, set the latest finish time of the activity ij as Lfij is equal to Lj. So since you are starting from j is equal to n, that is known. So the same number will be put under the arrowhead like Lf of the activity ij. Then compute the latest starting time of the activity ij. So now you know the finishing time. From this you find the latest starting time, and that will be the finishing time minus the duration that this activity was supposed to take. And then in order to find the latest finish time of the event I, we will use this relationship, which is Li is equal to minimum over k of Lk minus Dik, or simply this Lsij that we found. And we repeat these steps 2, 3 and 4 till we find L1, and L1 will become equal to E1, which was set as 0. So L1 will also be 0. So now coming to the computation of the latest start times of activities and the latest finish time of events or node. Suppose we know the latest finish times of events 6, 7, 8 and 9. So starting from this node 9, where L9 is 53, we find out that the latest finish time of activity 5.9 is 53. We subtract 9, which is the duration of this activity, and we get the latest start time of activity 5.9 as 44. Then latest finish time of event 8 is 45. That also becomes the latest finish time of activity 5.8. From this 45 we subtract 11 to get latest start time of activity 5.8 as 34. Similarly, from L7 is equal to 29, we get the latest finish time of activity 5.7 as 29. Subtract 12 from that, you get 17 as the latest start time of activity 5.7. Finally, from L6 is equal to 24, we get latest finish time of activity 5.6 as 24. Subtract 7 from that, we get 17 as the latest start time of activity 5.6. Now we have all the four latest starting times of the activities that are starting from event number 5. So we have to choose the minimum out of these four. The minimum out of these four is 17, whether it is this 17 or this 17, but it is 17. So we choose that as the latest finish time of node 5. Now this also becomes the latest finish time of activity 3.5. Subtract 6 from that, we get 11 as the latest start time of activity 3.5. Since event 3 or node 3 has only one activity that succeeds it, so this 11 also becomes the latest finish time of node number 3, and hence L3 becomes equal to 11. How do we find floats? The relationships for total float are presented here. The total float can be found either by taking the difference between the latest start time of an activity and the earliest start time of an activity, or alternatively we can find it by first finding the difference of the latest finish times of the head and tail events and then subtracting the duration of that particular activity. We can use any one of these. I usually prefer this one. The free float is then the difference between the total float and the head event slack. So that can also be written in this form: FF, which is free float, is equal to TF, which is total float, minus the slack of the head event, and head is denoted by index J. Or free float can be found using the earliest finish time of the head node minus the earliest finish time of the tail node minus the duration of the activity. Once again, I prefer this one. Finally, the independent float IF of an activity can be found by further subtracting the tail event slack from the free float. So IF of an activity is the free float minus the tail event slack, or independent float is equal to earliest finish time of the head node minus the latest finish time of the tail node minus the duration. Now we can observe that from total float, when we subtract a positive amount, we get free float, and when we subtract another positive amount, we get independent float. So independent float has to be less than or equal to the free float, which has to be less than or equal to the total float, and none of the floats can be negative because these represent time. Here is the practice problem number 1. In this problem, we have 11 activities. To draw the network diagram and at the same time assign node numbers, we note that the activities A, B and C do not have any predecessor, so they can start from node 1. Then activity A can end at node 2, activity B at node 3 and activity C at node 4. Activity D follows A, so this 2 would come here and its head node would become 5. Activity E starts after B, so its tail node would become 3 and the head event would become 6. Activity F follows C and its head event will also be 6 because E and F both are predecessors of K. Then activity G follows B and D. First have a look at D. We have 5 here, that would come here, but we cannot connect B because B already has a successor. So we will add a dummy activity, a row for dummy activity, and we'll show this relationship through this dotted arrow, which is called a dummy activity. then the head event of activity G becomes 7. Activity H follows A, so this 2 would come here and its head event can be numbered as 8. I follows H, the head event can be given a number of 9. Now J follows G and there is no successor, so it would also terminate in node number 9. Finally K follows E and F and it also terminates in the ending node 9. Now let us see, this is a dummy activity that I introduced. The activity D and activity B both are predecessors of G, but since B was also a predecessor of E, we could not put these two nodes together. Now let us execute the forward pass. We start from node number 1 and set E1, earliest finish time of node 1, as 0. That becomes the earliest start time of these three activities A, B and C. Then 0 starting time added to 10, we get the earliest finish time of activity A, and that also becomes the earliest finish time of node 2. Now this 10 gets written as earliest start time of these two activities. 10 plus 11 becomes the latest finish time of activity H, and this also becomes the earliest finish time of node 8. This 21 then becomes the earliest start time of activity I. Add 5 to that, you get 26 as the earliest finish time of activity 8-9. Now we come back here, we had this 10 as the earliest start time of activity D. We add 5 to it, we get 15 as the earliest finish time of activity D, but we cannot find the earliest finish time of node 5 because we do not have any number here right now. So we go back again, we see this 0, add 12 to it, we get 12 as the earliest finish time of activity B. That can be written as the earliest finish time of node number 3. That 12 then becomes the earliest start time of the dummy activity and the activity E. This 12 plus 0 is 12. Now we have all the heads having the numbers. That means we know the earliest finish time of both these activities which are terminating in node 5. So the maximum out of these two would become the earliest finish time of node 5. Now this 15 gets written here. We add 8 to it and 23 is the earliest finish time of activity G. This becomes the earliest finish time of node 7 also, and it is also the earliest start time of activity J. Add 6 to it, it becomes the earliest finish time of activity J. We come back here, we had this 12 as the earliest start time of activity 3-6 or activity E. We add 14 to it, we get 26 as the earliest finish time of activity E. Then from this 0 added 15, we get 15 as the earliest finish time of activity C. This 15 also becomes the earliest finish time of node number 4. Then it is placed here as the earliest start time of activity F. Add 7 to it, get 22 as the earliest finish time of activity F. Now choosing the maximum out of these two, which is 26, we get the earliest finish time of node 6. That also becomes the earliest start time of activity K. Add 9 to it, you get 35 as the earliest finish time of activity K. Now we have all the arrows or activities terminating in node number 9 with their earliest finish times. We choose the maximum out of these, and that maximum is 35, so E9 becomes 35, and that completes our forward pass. To begin the backward pass, we equate this E9 to L9, so L9 also becomes 35. This 35 is then placed as the latest finish time of these three activities I, J and K. From this 35 we subtract 5 to get the latest start time of activity I. This being the only tail here, this 30 also becomes the latest finish time of node 8. That 30 gets written here as the latest finish time of activity H. Subtract 11 from it, you get 19 as the latest start time of activity H. but we cannot go any further because we do not have the latest start time of D. So we come back here. From this 35 we subtract 6 and we get 29 as the latest start time of activity J. This also becomes L7. Now the same number is placed here as the latest finish time of activity G. Subtract 8 from that, we get 21 as the latest start time of G. This 21 is also the latest finish time of node 5. This 21 gets placed here and here. Now for activity D, this being the latest finish time, subtract 5, you get 16 as the latest start time of activity D. Now we have the required numbers on both these tails, so we choose these smaller out of this 19 and 16, and so L2 becomes 16. We have this 16 as the latest finish time of activity A. Subtract 10 and we get 6 as the latest start time of activity. Now this 21 was the latest finish time of the dummy activity. We subtract 0 and we get 21 as the latest start time of the dummy activity. We cannot move backwards any further, so we go here. Knowing this 35, we subtract 9 from this, we get the latest start time of activity K. This also becomes the latest finish time of node number 6. This 26 gets written here and here as the latest finish time of the activities E and F. From 26 we subtract 14 to get 12 here as the latest start time of E. Now we have two numbers here, 21 and 12. We choose the smaller of these two, which is 12, and that becomes the latest finish time of event 3. This 12 then gets written here as the latest finish time of the activity B. Subtract 12 from that, you get 0 as the latest start time of activity B. Coming back here, from this 26 we subtract 7, we get 19 as the latest start time of F. This 19 also becomes the latest finish time of node 4. Also it becomes the latest finish time of activity C. We subtract 15 from that to get 4 here as the latest start time of activity 4. Now we see three numbers here, 6, 0 and 4. We need to choose the smallest of these, the minimum out of these, which is 0, so L1 becomes 0. From this we can also observe that activity A is start of some path on which there is a possibility of delaying the activities by 6 units of time without affecting the completion of the overall project. Likewise, C or maybe some subsequent activities can be delayed by 4 units of time. But the path on which all these numbers are same, this is the critical path, and any activity on the critical path cannot be delayed, and if it gets delayed, then the overall project gets delayed. From this information that we generated through forward pass and backward pass, in other words using the EIs and LJs, we now find the slacks of all these nodes from node 1 till node 9, and that is through the difference of these two numbers, Li minus EI. So for node number 1, slack is 0. For node number 2, slack is 6. For node 3, slack is 0. For node 4, slack is 4. For node number 5, the slack is 6. For node number 6, the slack is 0. For node 7, slack is 6. For node 8, the slack is 9. And for node number 9, the slack is 0. Note we had this path which is in red color, 1, 3, 6, 9. This is the critical path because it is the sum of these durations that is 35. The duration of these three activities sum up to 35. And all those nodes on this path, they have 0 slack. Node number 1, node number 3, node number 6 and node number 9. Using this information, let us fill this table further. We had filled this table previously, except that this dummy activity was not represented previously. Instead, we had B written here. Now I have added the dummy activity in the network and I am showing that dummy activity here. Like we discussed previously, the activities A, B and C do not have any predecessors, so their earliest start time is set as 0. To this 0 we add 10 and we get the earliest finish time of activity. 0 plus 12 give us 12. 15 plus 0 we get 15 as the earliest finish time of these three activities. Now for D to start, A has to be finished, so this 10 comes here. It is similar to the node numbers. 10 comes here, we add 5 to this, we get 15 as the earliest finish time. For activity E, B has to finish. B finished at 12, so 12 comes here because B was also the predecessor of the dummy activity, so 12 comes here also. Now 12 plus 14 we get 26 as the earliest finish time of activity E, and 12 plus 0 we get 12 as the earliest finish time of the dummy activity. F follows C, so this 15 comes here, then 15 plus 7 is 22. G follows two activities which are its predecessors, the dummy activity and D. Dummy finished at 12, D finished at 15, and we have to choose the maximum out of these two, and that is 15. And then 15 plus 8, G would finish at 23. H follows A. A finished at 10. So 10 comes here, add 11 to that, you get 21 as the earliest finish time of H. I follows H. So 21 comes here, add 5 to this, you get 26. Then J follows G. G finished at 23. 23 plus 6 is 29. Then K followed E and F. E and F both had the same node number 6, but the activities, while node has the one unique value, activities can have different finishing times, and we have to choose the maximum out of these, which is 26 here, and 26 plus 9 is 35. Now this is just like performing the forward pass. In order to start the backward pass, we have to look at the activities that have their heads connected to the last event, which is node number 9. So for node number 9, we have to write the latest finish times as the maximum out of this entire column, which is 35. So this 35 goes as the latest finish time of all those activities whose heads are connected to node number 9. Now from this 35, we subtract 9 to get 26 as the latest start time of this activity K. Then 35 minus 6, we get 29 here, and 35 minus 5, we get 30 here. Then H is the predecessor of I. So I could start only if H was finished. So if I could start at 30, that means the latest H should finish was 30. From this 30, we subtract 11 to get 19. Now this 29 comes here because J follows G. So G should get this number 29, subtract 8 from that, and you get 21. Now this 21 goes as the latest finish time of two activities. One is the dummy activity and the other is activity D, because both are the predecessors of G. Now from this 21 we subtract 0 to get 21 as the latest start time of the dummy activity. And here F was the predecessor of K, so the number here at K, the latest start time of K, should become the latest finish time of E and F, because both E and F were the predecessors of K. So we get the same number here, 26, 26. Then this 26 minus 7 is 19, and this 26 minus 14 is 12. This 21 minus 5 is 16. Coming to the activity C, C was a predecessor of F. So the latest start time of F, which is 19, would come here. Subtract 15 from that, you get 4. B has two successors. One, the dummy activity, and the other E. So we have to choose the minimum out of these two, 12 and 21. Minimum out of 12 and 21 is 12. Then 12 minus 12 we get 0, and A was followed by D, so this 16 would come here, minus 10 we get 6. Now finding the total float, it only requires taking the difference of these two columns, latest start minus earliest start. So we would say 6 minus 0 as 6, 0 minus 0 is 0, 4 here, 6 here, 0 here, 4 here, 6 here, 9, 9, 6, then 26 minus 26 is 0, and 21 minus 12 is 9. After we have found the total floats, we need to find the free float and independent float, and for these two floats we require knowledge about the slacks. So let us bring the table that contains slacks that we found on the previous slide. We know the slack of each node. For the free float, we have to take the difference of the total float and the head event slack. For activity A, the head event is 2 and the slack of 2 is 6, so it is 6 minus 6, which is 0. Here obviously we will get 0, but if you want to verify, it is this 0 minus the head event slack of 3 is 0. 0 minus 0 is 0. Likewise, the slack of activity C is this 4 minus the slack of 4. Slack of 4 is also 4, so it is 0. So this is how we find the free floats of all the activities. In order to find the independent float, we know that it cannot be negative. So wherever we have zeros here, we can simply plug those zeros. If we have a non-zero number, then we should compute that. So we get this 4 minus the tail event slack. Tail event here is 4 and the slack of 4 is also 4. 4 minus 4 is 0. Obviously we will get these zeros here. From this 9 we subtract the slack of 8 and slack of 8 is 9, so we get 0. And here 6 minus the slack of 7, which is also 6, 0, 0 again 0, and 3 minus the slack of 3. The slack of 3 is 0, so 3 minus 0 is 3 here. So now we have computed the total floats, the free floats and the independent floats. What these mean will be explained on a subsequent slide. Let us go to the practice problem number 2, and this time instead of filling this table using the method just explained, I have drawn the network diagram, and using this network diagram we can now easily fill the table. Let us now execute the forward pass on this network. We set E1 as 0, the earliest start time of activity A as 0 and the earliest finish time as 10. E2 becomes 10. 10 also gets placed here as the earliest start time of activities B, C and D. This 10 plus 12, 22 is the earliest finish time of activity B, that is also E3. And E3 gets placed here. 22 plus 14 is 36, which is the earliest finish time of E. But we cannot go further because there is another head and we do not know the earliest finish time of H. So let's go back. In this 10 we add 15 to get 25, and so E4 is 25. This 25 gets placed here. 25 plus 7 is 32. This 32, and then E6 is 32. That 32 gets placed here, and the earliest finish time of H is 43. Now we have both the earliest finish times, so we can find E7, which will be the maximum out of these two. So E7 is 43. 43 gets placed here. Add 5 to 8, you get 48 as the earliest finish time of I. That also becomes E8. It gets placed here as the earliest start time of J. Add 6 to 8, you get 54 as the earliest finish time of J. Now we cannot find E9 because we do not have the earliest finish time of G. So we'll go back. We had 10 here. We add 5 to it and we get 15. But again we cannot go to node 5, so we go back here. 25 plus 0 we get 25. Now we have the earliest finish time of both the activities, dummy and D, and we choose the maximum out of these, which is 25. So E5 becomes 25. This 25 gets placed here as the earliest start, and we get 33 as the earliest finish time of activity G. Now we have these two numbers, we choose the maximum out of these, and E9 becomes 54. That also gets placed here. 54 plus 9, we get 63 as the earliest finishing time of activity K, and that is also the earliest finish time of node number 10. Let us execute the backward pass. Moving from right to left, we set L10 equal to the value of E10. That value, which is now the latest finish time of node number 10, also becomes the latest finish time of activity K. Subtract 9 from that, you get 54 as the latest start time of activity K. And this is also the latest finish time of node 9. Now this 54 will get placed at these two places for both the activities J as well as G. And 54 minus 8, we get 46 as the latest start time of G. This also becomes L5. L5 gets placed here under the heads of the two activities. And then 46 minus 5, we get 41 here. 46 minus 0, we get 46 here. But we can either find the latest finish time of 2 or 4 because there are other arrows whose tails are touching and we do not know their latest start times. So we'll go back to this number. 54 minus 6, we get 48 here. This becomes L8. L8 gets written here. Subtract 5, you get 43 here. Now this 43 also becomes L7. L7 gets placed at these two heads. So 43 minus 14, we get 29. And 29 becomes L3. L3 gets written here. And 29 minus 12, we get 17 here. Now this 43 minus 11, we get 32, which becomes L6. L6 gets written as the latest finish time of activity F. Subtract 7, you get 25. Now we have a number 25 and a number 46, and we have to choose the smaller of the two or minimum, and that is L4 is equal to 25. 25 gets here also, and you subtract 15 to get 10 here. Now we have all the three numbers here, 17, 10 and 41. We choose the smallest one and write it as L2, and then that L2 gets written here as the latest finish time of A. Subtract 10 from that to get 0 here, and this being the only tail touching 1, L1 becomes 0. After completion of the forward and backward passes, now is the time to compute the event slacks. Once again, notice I have shown the critical path in red color, and all those nodes that are shown in red, that means they are on the critical path, their slack will be 0. So starting from node 1, 0 minus 0 is 0, node 2 0, node 3 7, node 4 is 0, node 5 46 minus 25 is 21, node 6 0, 7, 8, 9 and node 10. All these have 0 slacks. Okay, just like the previous case, I have now added the dummy activity. Also, according to that diagram, these two columns have been filled, providing the tail and head event numbers. In this network, only activity A is the one that does not have any predecessor. So this is the starting activity of the project, and its start time is set as 0. Now this being 0, the activity takes 10 days or 10 units of time. This becomes 10. Now this 10 comes here at 3 places because B, C, D, all of them have A as the predecessor. Then this 10 plus 12 becomes 22, 15 plus 10 is 25, 5 plus 10 is 15. Now E starts after B, so the finishing time of B comes here. This 22 plus 14, we get 36. Also F follows C, so 25 from C comes here, and C is also a predecessor of the dummy activity, so we get 25 at these two places. Then this 25 plus 7, we get 32 here, and this 25 plus 0, we get 25. Now for G, to start, the dummy as well as activity D both should have been completed. D completes at time 15. The dummy activity completes at time 25. So the maximum out of these two being 25, we get 25 here, and we get 33 as the earliest finishing time of activity G. Now H follows F. The finishing time of F is 32. That comes here. 32 plus 11 is 43. I follows H and E. H finished at 43, E finished at 36. So the maximum out of these two is 43. We get it as the earliest start time of I. Add 5 to it, you get 48. Now J follows I, this 48 would come here. Add 6 to it, you get 54. K follows G and J. G finished at 33, J finished at 54. The maximum out of these two is 54, then 54 plus 9, you get 63. So 63 is the time of completion of the project that represents the critical path, and this 63 has to be written as the latest finish time of all those activities that are connected to the last node, which is node number 10. We have only one such activity, K, so this 63 would get written here. We subtract 9 from it to get the latest start time of K. Then K had its predecessor, which are G and J. So this time 54 would go against G as well as J. So 54 here, you get 6 as the duration of this activity. So the latest start time of this activity is 48. Then I is the predecessor of J, so this 48 would go here. Subtract 5, you get 43. Then H is also a predecessor of I, and so is E. So this 43 would come here as well as against E. 43 minus 11, we get 32. 54 minus 8. Now this 46, the latest start time of two activities, the dummy activity and activity D. So this 46 would go as the latest finish time of the dummy as well as the activity D. Then subtract 0, you get latest start time of the dummy activity, and then this 32, which was the latest start time of H, it comes as the latest finish time of F, because F was a predecessor of H. 32 minus 7, we get 25. From this 43, we subtract 14 to get 29. 46 minus 5 is 41. For this activity C, C is a predecessor of two activities, F and the dummy activity. So we will pick the smaller of the latest start time of the two activities, one being the dummy activity, the other being F. So one is 25, the other is 46, the smaller is 25, that comes here. Then subtract 15, you get 10. B is a predecessor of E, and so this time 29 would come here. 29 minus 12, you get 17. And A is a predecessor of three activities, B, C and D. So we will pick smaller of these three numbers, 17, 10 and 41, and the smallest number is 10. 10 minus 10 is 0. Now finding the total float, simply subtract this column, earliest start time, from this column, which is the column of latest start times. 0 minus 0 is 0. 17 minus 10 is 7. 10 minus 10 is 0. 41 minus 10 is 31. 29 minus 22 is 7. 0. 21, 0, 0, 0, 0 and 21. Now in order to compute the free floats, we need the slacks of all the events. So here is the table providing that information. All we need to do now is, for 0 we definitely write 0. For a non-zero number, we subtract the head event slack. Head event slack in this case is 7. So 7 minus 7 is 0. For 0 you write 0. 31 minus the slack of 5, and slack of 5 is 21, so we get 10. 7 minus the slack of 7, which is 0. 7 minus 0 is 7. 0 again. 21 minus the slack of 9. 21. Zeros. For zeros definitely we'll put zeros. For this non-zero number, 21 minus the slack of 5. Slack of 5 is 21, so again 0 here. Once again, for all those rows or activities where you have zeros as free floats, simply write zeros. For this activity D, we find out the independent float as this 10, which is the free float, minus the tail event slack. Tail event is 2, the slack is 0, so 10 minus 0 is 10. Then 7 minus the slack of 3. Slack of 3 is 7. 7 minus 7 is 0. 0 again. 21 minus slack of 5. 21 minus 21 and zeros here. So we have completely filled this table, and once again, while we have computed the total, the free and the independent floats, what these mean, that will be now explained on the next 2 slides. To explain the total, free and independent floats, I am referring to a rather simple network, and this being a very simple network, I have written all the earliest start, earliest finish, latest start, latest finish times, and what we need to do now is compute the slacks. The slacks are simply the difference of these two numbers. Those have also been provided now. Let us now compute the total, free and independent floats and then try to understand what these numbers mean. So for activity F, the total float will be the difference of these two numbers, the latest start of the activity F minus the earliest start. The total float of activity 5-6, which is activity F, is 21 minus 5, 16. The free float of the same activity is this 16, which is the total float, minus the head event slack, and the head event slack is 0. So the free float is also 16. The independent float is now this free float minus the tail event slack, 16, and so that is 0. Coming to activity E, which is numbered as 4-5, the total float of activity 4-5 is 18 minus 2, and that is 16. Then free float is this 16 minus the head event slack. Head event slack is 16, so its free float is 0. And if its free float is 0, the independent float will be 0. But let us see that if we try to find it, it will be this 0 minus the tail event slack, and the tail event slack is 16. So actually it should be 0 minus 16, but we cannot have a negative float, so we will write it as 0. For activity D, the total float will be the difference of these two numbers. So the total float of activity 1-4 is 16 minus 0, which is 16, and then the free float will be this 16 minus the head event slack, so 16 minus 16, it is 0, and the independent float will be this 0 minus the tail event slack, and the tail event slack is also 0. Let us now analyze these. This path is the critical path, and the time on this path is 25. You can verify this. 4 plus 6 plus 15 is 25. On the other hand, the time this path takes is 2 plus 3 plus 4, this is 9. And the difference of these two timings, of these two paths, one has a time of 25, the other has a time of 9. 25 minus 9 is 16. So all the activities that fall on this path, they have the same total float, 16, 16, 16. And you must have understood by now that activities on the critical path, their floats are always 0 because they are on the critical path. These cannot be delayed. This 16 here for these three activities means that any one of these activities or jointly these three activities can be delayed by 16 days without affecting the completion or time of this project, because the project is supposed to take 25 days anyway. So if we start this activity after 16 days, still the path would take 9 days and the project will get completed. If this one is completed in time and this one gets delayed by 16 days, again no problem. Likewise, if these two are not delayed, this one can be delayed by 16 days. But if this activity gets delayed by 10 days, then these two only have a leverage of 6 days left for them. And this is something that we learn from the free float and independent float. So the total float for this path is same for all the three activities. But when we come to the free float means that how much can this activity be delayed if it had a leverage of 16 days such that it would not affect the subsequent or succeeding activities, since there is no subsequent or succeeding activity. To begin with, it had 16 days at its disposal for delay, meaning D and E were not delayed. They were completed in 5 days. So we had 20 days available. Out of 20, 4 are required. So this could be delayed by 16 days. And since there is nothing following this activity, so its free float is also 16. Now independent float is that from the free float, you subtract the slack of this event. And this slack basically means that these activities, how much float do they have? So if they had collectively they had a float of 16 and we would allow them to get delayed by 16 days, then this one could not be delayed. So its independent float is 0. Coming to this activity, its total float, definitely it is common for all three, but free float is that if we want to find out the possible delay in this such that this activity is allowed to utilize its total float. So its total float is 16, but that is something that they were all sharing. So if we want that this one activity F should avail all the float, then the float available to this is 0. And since it is 0, definitely it will remain 0 if you want to allow this one its float again. So even though it becomes negative, but we will write 0. Likewise, 16 is the overall float, but if we want it to allow the subsequent activities E and F to use their floats or delay, then this activity cannot be delayed. So its free float is 0. And since nothing is a predecessor of this, the same number would come here, which is 0. Now this was a simple diagram through which I could explain this. Let us make it slightly difficult now. I would simply add 2 dummy activities to show the dependence of E not only on D but also on A. Likewise, the dependence of F not only on E but also on B. Here is the modified network where the activity durations are same, but because of these precedences or the requirement that another activity should also be completed before this activity can be started, the earliest finished and the latest finished times of these 2 nodes would change. Those nodes which are on the critical path, they will remain unaffected. Now since these 2 numbers change, their slacks also change. And now if you want to find the total float of activity F, it is now 21 minus 10. It is 11. And when you subtract this 0, you get the free float, which is 11. And from this 11, if you subtract this 11, you get the independent float, which is 0. So notice previously those were 16, 16 and 0. Now they are 11, 11 and 0. For activity E, which is numbered as 4, 5, the total float is this 18 minus this 4, it is 14. The free float is this 14 minus head event slack, which is 11, so it is 3 now. And the independent float is 3 minus 14, it is minus 11, but we will write it as 0. Previously this was 16 and this was 0, and now it has a float of 3, and I'll explain it why it has a float now, free float. Coming to the activity D or activity 1-4, the total float is this 16 minus this 0, and it is 16. The free float is this 16 minus this 14, 2, and the independent float is this 2 minus tail event slack, which is 0, so it is also 2. So you might now observe that everything has changed. Why do some activities still have total and free and independent floats positive, and why some of those don't have? Let us now evaluate this activity. Previously its slacks were 16, 0, 0. Now instead of 16, 0, 0, we have 16, 2 and 2. Reason being, previously we had only 2 paths in the network. This path DEF and another path which was ABC, and ABC was critical path. Now let us count the number of paths we have. The same 2 paths plus another path which is 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, and yet another path which is 1, 2, 3, 5, and then 6. So now we have 4 paths. Since this activity E cannot be started before 4 days, it is because of the dependence on A, which requires 4 days. This 4 comes here. So no matter what happens, this activity will have a float of 2. It can be delayed by 2 units of time without affecting the completion of the overall project. Coming to this activity E, the activity following that can start at time 10. The path DE takes only 5 days, but this path A, dummy, and E, this is 4 plus 0 plus 3, 7 days. So the maximum to reach to this point was 7, but the next one could start at 10 because of this, because this event would get completed when the maximum out of these two is reached. So it can start at 10, whereas this path can be completed in 5 days and this path can be completed in 7 days. So the maximum of these two being 7, 10 minus 7, this is our free float. So this activity can be delayed by 3 days without affecting the subsequent activity. But if we look at the activities succeeding that, its float does not affect the float of this, but its float affects these activities, and because of that its independent float is 0. Okay, that was it for today's lecture. There are 2 more lectures in this series. The next lecture would start with explanation of the floats computed in the practice problems number 1 and 2. We will then talk about the precedence diagramming method. Unlike the arrow diagram where we had circles or nodes connected by arrows and arrows were representing activities, in this method we will use rectangles wherein the activity name or title will be written here, its duration here, the earliest start, earliest finish times, the latest start, latest finish times, and the events will be represented by arrows. The advantage of using this method is that while the arrow diagram becomes quite messy, this looks neat, and also it's very easy to show the precedence. You do not require any dummy activities. Also, we will discuss the time cost relationship, wherein we would study that if a project is likely to be completed in 19 days, costing us less than $25,000, and we believe the 19 days are too much and we want to squeeze it or crash it, if we try to reduce its duration by allocating more resources, how much would it cost to say bring it to 14 days or 13 days? So that will be the topics that we'll cover in the second lecture, and then the last lecture of this series will be devoted to PERT, Program Evaluation and Review Technique. This is where we will consider the projects whose activities do not have deterministic times. If the time of every activity or most of the activities are random, those random variables would follow some distributions, and then whatever time we compute on the critical path, that will only be an expected value, an average value. So this is something we will discuss in our next lecture.